I'm back working on this HP85B computer. In the first video in this series we had a quick look at this machine, powered it up. It kind of works, it boots up, it mostly does what it's supposed to, but the tape drive doesn't work and some of the keys stick down. Now that's quite a common problem with these machines, and it's because of the design of the key plungers. So for example, if we press the key down, as you can see, it sticks down, and it can be quite a pain getting these back up again, and obviously it makes the machine fairly unusable. And what I want to do in this video is address this problem. Most of the keys are okay, so I'm not going to kind of shotgun this and do every single key. I'll do them as and when I need to as they stop working, but there are about 4 or 5 at the moment that stick down, so I'm just going to do those in this particular video. So as the L key is known to be faulty, we'll start with that. So the first job is to pop the keycap off, and then we'll see where to go from there. So if you haven't worked on keyboards before, they're normally fairly easy to deal with. It does vary a lot from keyboard to keyboard, and these particular keyboards are fairly easy to work on. And in particular, because of the design of the key, they're ironically fairly easy to fix, but very prone to failure. And the first step is to remove the keycaps. And although you can buy special tools for doing this, and because I work on so many different types of machine, I don't tend to use the proper key removal tools. What I do is I take a piece of single core wire, just bend it into a double loop that suits the particular keys that I'm working on, and then all you do is you just slide this underneath the key, and you give a gentle pull and it will just remove the keycap. And you don't need to go to all the trouble of buying specialist keycap removal tools. And then you just pop onto the next one and just keep pulling them off, and then throw it away. And then next time you come to a keyboard, might well be different, and so you make another one that specifically suits those keys. So we've got the keycap out of the way. The next thing we need to do is remove the white plunger. And what happens with these is there's kind of a rectangular or square plunger with a cross piece going across it. And the way these keys work is there are 2 contacts that normally, without the plunger in place, touch each other. And when the plunger is in place, it basically puts a piece of plastic between the 2 contacts, and when you push the plunger down, it allows the 2 contacts to come together. The key cap sits inside that white square that you can see, and unfortunately, because people tend to push the keys fairly hard, that white plastic has got a habit of splitting, and it allows the key to go too far down into it. And it is tapered slightly, as is the key, because it's molded plastic, so to make these they have to taper them slightly. And because it's a wedge, it basically splits the piece of white plastic, and then it goes too far apart, and as you push it in, what happens is you'll notice that without the key fitted, it moves up and down nice and freely. But when there's a key in there, because it's a wedge shape, as you push it down, it spreads the square plastic piece out, and it wedges it in the hole that it sits in. So it's kind of a situation where you've got a wedge pushing down into a square that's been split by the wedge, forcing it open, and then the thing jams in the hole. And so the harder you press it, the more it splays out and wedges harder. And it's just unfortunate there wasn't a stop on these, or that they didn't make the walls slightly thicker. But it's just really, these have been just pressed too hard by the users, and it causes these to split. And they could also have got round this by making the shoulders slightly higher, so this wouldn't go in as far. If it stopped on this ridge sooner, then the key would still work, because the key's operating about there, but it goes a long way down, and it's that final movement that causes the plunger to split. So the first thing we have to do is pull the plunger out. So I'll get the plunger removed. Okay, that's the plunger removed. Now, a lot of people will say that you have to unsolder the key to get this to come out, but you don't. You can just pull these out with the keyboard still attached to the PCB. There's a spring in here as well, so you don't want to lose that. So to get these out, there's a clip on the bottom, so if we look very carefully you'll notice there's kind of a clip at each side. But these are relatively soft. Now, if you're careful, what you can do is get a suitable pair of pliers. So I've got ones that are quite a nice fit in here. Now, you do have to be careful doing this. If you kind of lever it off to one side, you'll either snap the end off this, which might not matter if you're going to replace it, or more importantly, you might break the shoulder off the keyboard. But they normally come out fairly easily. They can be quite stiff, but they will come out without having to desolder everything and without even having to remove the case of the machine. You can do this with this still fitted into the machine or the outer cover on. So this is why I only change them as and when I need to. So if I find a key sticking down, I pop the cap off, pull this out, and what I do is I've made up some replacement plungers. There are a number of people that have models for these for 3D printers online, and they're all pretty much the same. It's just really a copy of the original plunger to a certain extent, but it has to be modified in order to work on a 3D printer. I drew these just really as a copy of the plunger in such a way that it suits my particular 3D printer, and then these will fit quite nicely down into the switch, and once pushed in it will clip into place, replace this, and I can then refit the spring and the keycap. So you have to make it a nice fit for the spring. Needs the cross piece in, of course. You can just see it down in there, and that's what spreads the two key contacts. So hopefully you can see the contacts just poking up here, and normally, as you can see, they are touching each other, and it's that kind of cross piece that holds them apart. So when this is pushed up with the spring, it separates those contacts. When you push the plunger in, the contacts move together, and it effectively operates the key. So as I said, these are fairly easy to change, and the way you draw it is really going to depend on your particular 3D printer. So I'll get this refitted and we'll test it. Incidentally, you have to make these fit the keycap, of course. That has to fit quite nicely onto the end. Luckily I have quite a nice 3D printer, so it prints without having to clean these up afterwards, but you might well find that your particular 3D printer requires some cleanup once it's printed. And you can see the difference on this white one. I don't know how clear this is, but if we look at the top, you'll find that one of these corners is broken. So it's this one. So you can see hopefully that that corner is cracked. There are a number of things you can try and do to fix these. So if we put the key back in, notice that there is space around the outside. However, this key goes all the way down until these stops hit the shoulder on here. Now, there's a few things you can do. You could either make the plunger you create longer. There is space around the outside here. You can, in fact I have tried this and it works quite well. You can make the top end of this much bigger, and it can effectively fill the entire space within the keycap. I found it's not really necessary with the modern, I just use PLA for this. Modern PLA is very good in tensile strength, and I think a few of the models you'll find online have this extra ridge around the top. It reduces the travel of the key very slightly, by, in this case it's a millimetre, but it doesn't matter. The key operates, as I said, well before it goes all the way down, and this also acts as a nice stop, so you don't just keep pressing the key down and splaying it out. So it's quite a nice stop system that it creates. So we'll get this put back in. Unfortunately I can't do it with the camera in the way because I can't really see down into the hole with the camera there. All I'm going to do is push this down into the recess. I'll refit the spring first, push this down into the recess, making sure that the two key contacts separate properly and go either side of the spreader bar, and then this will push all the way down. The little tabs will engage, and we can then refit the keycap. Before I refit the plunger, I just thought I'd mention another important point when you're doing this is the two contacts that you need to go either side of this bar will have a tendency to kind of try and dig into it, and if you then just press the plunger down you'll destroy the contacts. That's the only risky part really in doing this, and you can get various tools for doing this, and again I found the best tool for this is a couple of pieces of paper. So these are just cut to roughly the same width as the contacts, and all I do is just carefully put the two pieces of paper between the contacts, and what you then do is you just pass one piece of paper up through each side of the plunger, and then when you push this down, the paper is quite a light contact spring force, so as you push this down the paper will guide the two contacts apart and round the crossbar, and when this is just starting to pass by the contacts you can then withdraw the paper, and it just saves you risking damaging the contacts. Also you have to put the spring on first, but it just goes around the outside of the paper, and then the whole thing just slides down, clips into place, and you can refit the keycap. So just check the keycap fits before we refit the plunger, which it does, and I can now just pop this into place, and we'll see if the key then functions. So I put the two pieces of paper between the switch contacts, pass the spring over the paper and all the way down so it just drops down, and then passed the two ends of the two pieces of paper, don't know how clear this is coming across, through each side of the switch slide, so it's one piece either side of the crossbar, and then press the key plunger down into its recess, and as it gets towards the bottom, because it's got the little tabs on as the original, it clips into place, and that also stops it coming back out again. And now that it's in place we can simply pull out the two pieces of paper, and this is now free to move up and down, and we can refit the keycap, so that will just go back on in the same way as the original, and so this key is now working. So we'll power it up, see if it works, and go from there. Okay, I haven't pushed the keycap all the way on yet. The last millimetre or so is quite tight, so I don't want to push it all the way on until I've checked that it works. It will come off again relatively easily, but it's just easier doing it this way. So we'll power the machine up. I'll dim the lights a bit so you can see it more clearly, and we'll try pressing the key, and as you can see that works just fine. I'll turn the light back on. So that's the easiest way. It takes literally maybe a minute to do each key, so as I said it's just a case of popping off the keycap, pulling out the original plunger, being very careful not to damage the keyboard. I don't refit the original plungers, so I'm not particularly concerned, but I don't want to snap the top off, because otherwise you've got to remove the entire keyboard housing to get these out, so you need to be fairly careful. These are quite strong. It's best to try and pull two adjacent sides that are not or two sides that are not adjacent to the broken corner, just to make sure it's got a bit more strength. Sometimes you might have pulled one side then the other if it seems to jam, but it doesn't take a huge amount of force. If you're pulling really hard you're probably doing something wrong. Just be careful not to go too deep into the switch or it will damage the key contacts. Pop these out, use the special tool to align it, put the spring back on, put the new plunger in, put the key cap on, and then you're done. So it's as simple as that. and it's a very robust fix. I've done this quite a few times on machines over the years, and this has always been a permanent fix. I think the PLA is a lot stronger than the original plastic plungers anyway. So that's how I'm going to do this. As I said, I'll just do the rest of the keys as I find ones that stick. I've done I think 5 now on this particular keyboard, and I think the L key is one of the last. I think there's one more somewhere, I can't remember which one it is, but there's one more somewhere that sticks. But that's how I go about repairing the keys on these.